It's hard to believe, but this year marks the 25th anniversary of the insanely popular Grand Theft Auto series. From its humble beginnings to becoming one of the most successful franchises of all time, I think we can all agree that it's been a wild ride for Rockstar's flagship game. While everybody else waits on pins and needles for news about Grand Theft Auto 6, I thought it might be fun to look back at what Electronic Gaming Monthly's review crew said about the sequels, spin-offs, ports, and more. Now, in case you're wondering, EGM managed to review a total of 11 Grand Theft Auto games between 1997 and 2008. This includes all of the early overhead installments, the 3D sequels, and even the PSP spin-offs. Sadly, this does not include Grand Theft Auto 5, Chinatown Wars, and really just anything else released after 2008. Oh, and there are a few handheld ports that were completely ignored. What we're gonna do is count down the best and worst Grand Theft Auto games using Electronic Gaming Monthly's own words and scores. There's gonna be no editorializing here. We're gonna focus on what the critics said back when these games first came out. So grab yourself a big cup of hot coffee and join me for this highly illegal episode of EGM Ranks Grand Theft Auto. Alright, kicking off the list at number 11 is Grand Theft Auto on the PlayStation. Let's face it, this game's hype is based 100% on the so-called controversial and mature content. Without the swearing and the criminal activities, GTA would have very little draw. The action does have an old-school arcade feel to it, which is a plus, and I have to admit I had fun carjacking and cruising around the city. GTA is definitely worth checking out, if for nothing more than seeing how naughty this game can get. Number 10, Grand Theft Auto 2 on the Dreamcast. I'm all for mature-themed games, but I also want them to be fun to play. I found Grand Theft Auto 2 to be a little too methodical for my tastes. There's just too much running and driving around the city for the sake of doing so, and it's not too enjoyable. Wreaking havoc on the city streets is only amazing for the first 20 or so times after all. The control scheme is a little too convoluted no matter which preset you turn on, and it could have really taken more of an advantage of the Dreamcast power. There isn't much here that you couldn't have done on the PlayStation. If you're a sucker for bad words and senseless violence, give it a shot, but just don't expect a deep game beyond that. Number 9, Grand Theft Auto London 1969 on PlayStation. When this first came into the office, the reaction from the review crew was marked in two areas. A general consensus that it was cool for someone to develop an add-on disc for the PlayStation game and produce a package with both games in it. And a pretty widespread acknowledgement that something other than GTA would have been cooler. All but Sean and the native Brit John D shunned the game. Mr. England continues to assert that the Brit humor is funny, in an Austin Powers kind of way, and it's all about the gameplay rather than the graphics. Number 8, Grand Theft Auto 2 on the PlayStation. I'm with the school of thought that says that the first GTA sold well due to its notoriety, not because it was a great game. Well, with Grand Theft Auto 2, they've capitalized on its pop culture appeal and upped the dosage of hip urban sponsorships. But there's definitely enough here to set it apart from its former self, like the fact that the different gangs will react to you based on your reputation. Check this out if you liked GTA. Number 7, Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories on PlayStation Portable. Those old flaws are chafing at me like a pair of shrunken Jordashes. 4 GTA since number 3, and I'm still cursing the aiming? And Vice City's twisty streets, awkward dead ends, and broken spots turn leisure driving into fiery wrecks. It's frustrating, but I still have to agree with Greg. You get an impossible amount of game for your PSP buck. It feels too familiar at first, but when you reach the empire building part of the game, you'll wonder how this much fun can fit onto a tiny disc. Number 6, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on the Xbox. Even now, more than 6 months after it made its real impact, San Andreas is still one of the most ambitious games ever made. But the move to Xbox feels more like a formality. You don't really notice the slightly nicer environments, and if ever a game didn't need a custom soundtrack, this was the one. I actually quite like the car handling, but I had a much harder time with the combat here than I did on PS2. Blame it on the Xbox pad, I do. Think of this like one of those DVD re-releases of a classic movie. It's still great, but 8 million of you have already seen it once. Number 5, Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories on PlayStation Portable. Soon after I began playing the PSP's first entry in the Grand Theft Auto series, I stomped on a street corner in Liberty City's Hepburn Heights neighborhood and I took in the scene. Some elderly pedestrian shuffling by, a biker knocks over a crossing pedestrian who gets up, jacks the closest car and just takes off. It's good to be home. I have a few, mostly familiar complaints though. The PSP's analog nub makes precise movement challenging. Camera controls can also prove tricky as you must hold down the L to change your view. And then you have the series' Achilles heel, on-foot targeting. Be prepared to frequently lock on to the wrong dude. But when you realize the scope of what developer Rockstar has been able to pull off, your expectations for portable gaming will be changed. Number 4, Grand Theft Auto 3 on the PlayStation 2. What's cool about this game is that even when you're not taking on new missions and advancing the story, you'll discover loads of extra stuff to pass the time. Everything you can do in Grand Theft Auto 3 is so compelling that you'll find yourself puttering around the city for hours on end just to see what kind of trouble you can get into. And even if you do tire of that, the actual missions are still a blast to play on their own. You'll feel like you're in a Scorsese movie when your benefactors send you out on a hit or a job. Plus, the story is one of the best and most adult that I've seen in a video game. If you haven't done it already, buy this game. Number 3, Grand Theft Auto 4 on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. When people talk about open world games, the mental emphasis is usually put on open. Go anywhere, do anything, that's all fine and dandy, but Grand Theft Auto 4 shows that you really need to be thinking about the world. This reimagined Liberty City is as dense and focused as San Andreas was broad and sprawling, wherein our immensely likable immigrant hero is driven by multiple goals and there's no time for flying around with jetpacks or infiltrating top-secret government research bases. GTA 4 is a traditional crime story through and through, with a script that rarely strays from its purpose, a pitch-perfect supporting cast, and an expert combination of in-game storytelling and crafted cutscenes. The expected twists and turns are familiar territory, but the characters will make you care when something inevitably goes wrong. Number 2, Grand Theft Auto Vice City on PlayStation 2. It's an understatement to say that the general media, the uninformed consumer, and the political vampire just don't get it. They'll harp on the fact that Grand Theft Auto glorifies violence, the killing of cops, transgressions with hookers, and all sorts of other filthy sins. What they fail to realize is that the series succeeds because of its gameplay. The violence may be the sugar-coated crunch that lures the masses, but it's the gut of the game that makes them stay. With an improved targeting system, better graphics, a wide variety of vehicles to command, a dope 80s soundtrack, near-perfect control, and about twice as much of everything, Rockstar has improved upon the groundbreaking work of Grand Theft Auto 3 and created an instant classic in Vice City. And at number 1, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on PlayStation 2. I can't wrap my head around how much stuff is packed in this one disc. It's grand, it's ambitious, and as funny as it may sound, it's legendary. Playing this game, I feel like a little kid again. My fun is limited only by my imagination. You can do so much here at your leisure. As wide as San Andreas is, I do wish the main mission line was a little bit more flexible. Yes, you can tackle each mission however you'd like, but as a general rule, you still have to complete one before you can move on to the next. Several branching paths that lead to different conclusions would have been nice. So if you didn't want to help the triad guy in San Fierro, or you didn't want to do the long cross-country missions, then you wouldn't have to. It's sad that the inevitable controversy surrounding the gang, violence, sex, drug content will outshine the game's good points in the eyes of the general public. Because if you strip back all the vices, what you have left is still a brilliant piece of work. Something that developers should be proud of, and something that gamers of all tastes will love. Hey, thanks for watching us count down Electronic Gaming Monthly's top 11 Grand Theft Auto games. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we have a whole playlist full of EGM ranking game franchises like Castlevania, Resident Evil, Batman, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Sonic the Hedgehog, and more. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite Grand Theft Auto game? If you go back and read my reviews throughout the years, you're going to find that I've been pretty high on the GTA series since at least the early 2000s. I can think of great things about pretty much every installment, at least when it comes to the 3D versions. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with a ton of reviews. Also, I'm still looking for people that can lend their voice to the upcoming Die Hard Game Fan Best and Worst series. That's debuting 1 week from today, so you better hurry if you want to be involved. While you ponder that, do me a favor and click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.